A short summary of the Master Guides, Learn Anything, summarized and read to you by the Inner Revolution, saving you time on your journey to wisdom. Subscribe to our channel for more free audiobook summaries now. Whether you're in school, starting a new job, diving into a new hobby, or trying to keep up with an ever-changing workplace, the need to keep learning is a basic fact of life. However, you may have self-defeating attitudes that stop you from achieving everything you can, such as a belief that you're not smart enough or that you have to be born with special aptitudes in order to master certain subjects or skills. Thankfully, there's a wide array of research to the contrary. You can learn anything you want at any point in life. More than that, it's now widely established that learning itself is a skill that can be learned. In Shortform's Master Guide, we'll draw from the work of 13 educational experts to lay out how to master the skill of learning. This begins by adopting a healthy mindset toward learning, taking control of your schedule so that you can focus, and making the best use of various educational tools such as memorization, comprehension, learning from mistakes, and self-testing. At the end of the guide, we'll give links to further reading so you can explore the concept of learning in all its facets. Anyone can learn. To illustrate the concepts in this guide, we'll use the fictional example of Jack and Sarah, two characters on different learning paths. Jack is a single father who's always dreamed of playing the guitar. Sarah, his daughter who's applying to college, has set her sights on a career in engineering, but first, she has to pass her high school physics class. Adopt a learning mindset. The first step to learning anything you want is to believe you can learn anything you want. Commonly referred to as a growth mindset, this idea is rooted in the concept of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt throughout our lives. In this section, we'll discuss the characteristics of a growth mindset, the scientific basis behind it, and the practical steps and benefits of adopting one yourself. In Mindset, psychologist Carol S. Dweck differentiates between a growth mindset and the more common fixed mindset, in which you believe your abilities are unchangeable and that you were born with a certain amount of intelligence. On the other hand, if you adopt a growth mindset, you view your innate abilities as a starting point on which you can build with hard work, persistence, and the right learning strategies. A growth mindset frees you from judging yourself so you can explore your full potential. You may even find you have a passion for learning and seek challenges that stretch your mind. In this case, stretching your mind is more than just an expression. While it's true that no two people are the same, we all have the capacity for growth. Scientists now know that the human brain is constantly forming and discarding neural pathways to incorporate new information and skills. In Limitless Mind, educator Joe Bowler explains that anytime you learn a new idea, your brain forms new connections, strengthens them with repeated use, and creates new links between pre-existing neural pathways. The key lies in adopting the belief that you can learn. Research shows that your attitude toward learning has a direct impact on how your brain functions. People who believe they can learn show heightened levels of brain activity compared to those who believe their abilities are fixed. When you have a fixed mindset, you believe, or were told, that you were born with specific traits and a certain, unchangeable amount of intelligence. Dweck and Bowler both assert that many of us are trained in this false mindset from an early age, for instance, by teachers who believe that IQ, inherent talent, or differences based on gender and race determine everything. You're either smart or you're dumb, you can learn or you can't. Fixed mindset thinking is especially pernicious and must be corrected to unlock your full potential. Eliminate unhelpful beliefs. But how do you adopt a healthy mindset toward learning if you've gone your whole life believing you can't do it? In Limitless, life coach Jim Quick lays out 3 steps to this process. Identify limiting beliefs. Be mindful of times when you tell yourself that you can't do something. Look out for phrases like I can't, I don't, and I'm not. Find the facts. Limiting beliefs are often untrue. What you think are facts about yourself may actually be incorrect opinions. Therefore, ask questions to get to the truth. Form new beliefs. Once you've labeled your self-limiting beliefs and found the truth behind them, you can replace them with new beliefs that are more accurate and helpful. A healthy mindset is also crucial to learning because unhealthy mindsets result in thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that hinder success. In the only study guide you'll ever need, Jade Bowler warns that a negative mindset triggers a fear of failure, which leads to procrastination and a lack of motivation. You may find that you have no desire to learn, either because you've given up or hold negative beliefs about your ability to succeed. Jack's and Sarah's beliefs in our fictional example. Jack tried to learn guitar when he was young but quickly gave up after his early efforts produced little success. Later in life, he realizes that not following through is a source of regret. He begins to understand that when he was young, he had an unrealistic expectation of quick results. To follow his dream as an adult, he has to believe that playing guitar is an achievable goal, but it will take hard work and persistence. Sarah faces a different challenge. As Bowler describes in Limitless Mind, girls in school are still told today that they're not suited for science and math. Her classmates may receive different messages, such as that they're only good at sports or that they don't have an inherent talent for the arts. To overcome negative messaging, students like Sarah may need the help of parents and role models to form healthy beliefs about their abilities. Sarah was inspired by women in the space program, and Jack is supportive of her ambitions. The myth of learning styles. In addition to false beliefs about whether you can learn, you may also harbor unhelpful beliefs about how you learn. There's a common myth that everyone has a learning style, such as visual, auditory, or hands-on, and that you learn best when taught in a way that matches your learning preference. Instead, science shows that you actually learn best when you make use of multiple learning styles at once. Modern educators argue against the learning style theory while touting the benefits of engaging multiple senses in the learning process and embracing the aspects that cause you to struggle. While it may be true that people have distinct preferences about the way they learn, in Make It Stick, Peter C. Brown, Henry L. Roediger III, and Mark A. McDaniel show that learning isn't inhibited if the teaching style doesn't match the learning style. In fact, everyone learns best when the teaching style matches the subject of the lesson, such as using pictures to teach geometry or audio to teach a foreign language. Also, fixating on learning styles can limit your view of your potential, which can then affect your confidence to try new things, how much effort you put in, and your perseverance in the face of obstacles. Multisensory learning. Regardless of your preferred learning style, you learn something even better if you see it and hear it. In Learning How to Learn, Barbara Oakley and Terence Sajnowski explain that connecting an idea to multiple sensory inputs creates more synaptic connections in your brain. This makes it easier to learn and remember because there are more neural pathways you can use to retrieve the idea. Therefore, the more senses you engage in learning something, the better you'll learn it. You can do this by listening to a book on audio while you read it, or by watching an instructional video on how to repair a faucet while you do it. Learning from mistakes. You may balk at attempting a particular learning style because you feel you struggle with it and end up making mistakes. Joe Bowler argues that that's exactly when the most powerful learning takes place. Brain scans prove that students who spend time correcting their mistakes exhibit more mental activity than students who get the right answers initially. Therefore, when you have to fight through a problem, you're creating more neural connections than you would have otherwise. Struggling to learn and making mistakes is what increases your mental capacity. Jack and Sarah's early struggles in her high school physics class. Sarah's greatest challenge is translating word problems into mathematical expressions she can solve. She often makes algebraic mistakes that she has to work hard to correct. Meanwhile, her father Jack gets increasingly frustrated with the manual dexterity required to switch between musical chords on his guitar. He often puts his fingers on the wrong fret or takes too much time between chord transitions. As frustrating as their struggles are, every time they correct their own errors, their brains form new neural connections. The mental pathways that represent the correct concepts and skills grow stronger over time with repetition, so that eventually Jack and Sarah both advance to the next level of difficulty, which will involve a whole new round of mistakes to learn from. Optimize your focus. The next step in preparing yourself to learn is to set aside the time and create the right environment in which you can maximize your ability to focus. This involves prioritizing your activities, planning your schedule, eliminating distractions, and creating the proper atmosphere for yourself. Take charge of your schedule. Jade Bowler suggests you begin by writing down every obligation you have so that your study time, work, chores, and other commitments don't crowd each other out. Next, you should prioritize your tasks and study plans based on 1, your level of understanding of the topic, and 2, each task or plan's deadline. Once you've prioritized your tasks, schedule a time to complete them. Bowler recommends scheduling your priorities and learning sessions week by week for up to a month in advance so that you can make the best use of your time, letting you study while maintaining free time for work, family, and other activities. Similarly, in How to Become a Straight A Student, Cal Newport suggests planning out your whole day. If you don't, your brain will be constantly distracted by incomplete tasks. In contrast, when you have a plan, you can concentrate on what you're doing, whether that's studying, practicing a skill, or having lunch with a friend. To manage your schedule, Newport's book presents a method using a calendar and a list. The calendar should be large enough that you can fit several items in each day, and the list is a piece of paper you carry around, divided into columns titled Schedule and To Remember. While Newport's and Bowler's instructions are tailored for academic students, they can be adapted for other lifestyle needs as well. Remove distractions. Organizing your schedule is just the first step to improving your ability to focus on learning. Oakley and Sejnowski insist that after setting aside time for learning, you need to eliminate distractions while you're studying. Distractions tie up the limited capacity of your brain's working memory. Since you learn by connecting ideas in working memory, reducing the amount of memory that you have available will slow down your learning. Thus, in addition to blocking off time, you should silence your phone, turn off the TV, find a quiet place to study, and ask your friends and family not to disturb you. However, for some kinds of learning, a quiet setting might not be ideal. In ultra learning, Scott Young argues that your ability to focus is influenced by arousal, how alert and energized you are. An environment that induces low arousal keeps your mind relaxed enough to take in new information. On the other hand, high arousal is effective for simple activities requiring lots of energy, like sports. You can thus improve your focus by adapting your environment to give you the optimum level of arousal for the task at hand. For example, if you're reading, you'll have more success doing it in a quiet environment, low arousal, than a noisy one, high arousal. If you're learning martial arts, the opposite might be true. Jack and Sarah's calendar. As a single parent, Jack has little time in his schedule to focus on learning guitar. To find more, he decides to limit his TV time and practice in his basement instead, where the noise won't be distracting to Sarah. Sarah's challenge is that she has a full load of classes, plus extracurricular activities and friends. While maintaining a balanced life is important to stave off burnout, her physics class is the most essential to getting into the college program she wants. As such, she sets aside time every evening in which she turns off her phone, retreats to her room, and focuses exclusively on her physics homework. Use your learning toolbox. Once you begin the learning process, it only makes sense to use every appropriate tool you have available. After all, learning isn't a singular process but is composed of many facets that all work together. These include committing information to memory, drawing a deeper understanding from new knowledge, developing skills through trial and error, and repeatedly testing your comprehension. You may not always feel enthusiastic about the learning process. In Learn Like a Pro, Barbara Oakley and Olaf Skew recommend 3 types of goals that can strengthen your motivation and reduce the need to exert self-discipline. Long-term goals, like starting your own business, keep you focused on and excited about the future. Stepping stone goals, like getting your MBA, are closer in time and help you reach your long-term goal. Process goals are short-term, actionable learning tasks, like studying for your MBA, that build to your stepping stone goals. Jack and Sarah's goals. Jack's long-term goal is to eventually perform for other people, perhaps at an open mic night at his favorite neighborhood bar. His stepping stone goal is to reach a skill level where he can learn new songs quickly, either by ear or by reading sheet music. His process goal is to learn one song well enough to play it from beginning to end. Sarah's academic goals are easier to define. Her long-term goal is a career in engineering. One stepping stone goal is to get accepted into college. Her closest process goal is to pass her next physics exam. Memorization. Often, the first step in any learning process is to absorb and memorize new information, whether it's a list of historical facts, scientific concepts, or steps to perform a task. The trick is to do it in a way that lets you retain what you've learned and access it when needed in the future. For this reason, it helps to understand how memory works, what practices help strengthen memorization, and what mental techniques make it easier to recall what you've memorized. Oakley and Skew write that before knowledge can enter your long-term memory, it first needs to go through your working memory. Working memory temporarily holds facts, thinks through information, and solves problems. It's a crucial part of the learning process, but it has limits. Working memory can only hold 3 or 4 thoughts at a time, and if you try to think about more than that, you'll likely forget some of those ideas. However, the neural connections that your working memory creates eventually enter your long-term memory once those connections have been sufficiently strengthened. So how do you pass information from your short-term into your long-term memory? Jade Bowler states that your brain remembers information best by engaging with it repeatedly over time. Each time you review information, you'll be able to remember it longer, eventually ingraining it into your long-term memory. You can also enhance this by connecting information to concepts you already know. For example, to remember the purpose of white blood cells to fight disease, you might associate that information with a concept you're already familiar with, like the mythological white knight who comes to someone's aid. Oakley and Sejnowski explain how this works on the neurological level, in which memories are based on neural connections. Connecting a new neural pattern in your brain, such as facts about white blood cells, to an existing one, the myth of the white knight, makes the new data easier to retrieve. One example of how to connect neural patterns is to create mental pictures to represent the concept you're learning, especially if the concept isn't visual. Pictures are easier to commit to memory than abstractions like words and numbers, so if you can link a fact to a mental image, you not only create more neural connections, but you connect them to something, namely the picture, that's easy to retrieve from memory. Many people try to burn information into their memories by rereading, but the authors of Make It Stick say this approach only commits the information to your short-term memory, making it a waste of time in the long run. Instead, the most effective way to improve retention of new information is through retrieval practice, which is any exercise that requires you to recall what you've learned. You can practice retrieval with classroom quizzes, flashcards, self-testing, and reflection, when you assess how you approached a particular problem and how you can improve next time. Jack and Sarah feel their heads both music and science require memorizing information so well that you can recall it on command. For Jack, this means learning chord shapes and string picking patterns, which he does by endless practice and repetition while associating the tactile feel of his playing with the different sounds that he produces. In physics class, Sarah has to memorize many physical laws and how they're represented in mathematics. To do this, she associates each mathematical formula with a mental image of the physical reaction that each law represents. For example, to remember that an object's momentum is equal to its mass multiplied by its velocity, P equals mv, she imagines a giant boulder, the mass, rolling quickly downhill, its velocity, as Indiana Jones tries to outrun it. Comprehension. It's one thing to memorize facts and ideas, but true learning requires actually understanding what you've committed to memory. Comprehension, also known as conceptual knowledge, is the understanding of how individual ideas relate to each other. There are techniques to develop conceptual knowledge, use it as a basis for even further learning, and free up mental resources that were previously taxed by memorization. The authors of Make It Stick suggest that instead of simply memorizing information when you're learning something new, you'll gain a more meaningful understanding if you identify the underlying principles that will guide you when you use your new knowledge. One way to extract the main principles is to look at multiple examples at once to see the common thread more clearly. If you examine two different problems at once, you may notice similarities or differences that illuminate the underlying rules. Once you've found them, connect those principles with prior relevant knowledge. This process creates context, which deepens your understanding, helps create mental models, and brings together interrelated concepts. Scott Young asserts that deep comprehension gives you a solid foundation that lets you build on your knowledge to understand even more complex ideas. For example, you must have a deep understanding of algebra before you can master calculus. However, Young says that when you think you understand something more than you actually do, you keep yourself from learning. Therefore, you should frequently question yourself to avoid overestimating your knowledge. Always ask, do I understand this well enough to explain it? According to Bowler, another advantage of conceptual understanding is that it takes up less memory than lists of memorized facts. Furthermore, understanding how different ideas relate to one another creates new avenues for problem solving. For example, if you were to memorize a separate list of driving directions to every place you regularly visit, the grocery store, the post office, a friend's house, that would be 100 times more taxing than simply building a mental map of your city and how its major roads intersect. Jack and Sarah make progress through repeated practice and applying what they've learned. Jack and Sarah both start to rely less on memory and more on their personal understanding of their subjects. When solving problems, Sarah finds that she no longer has to strain to remember the basic laws of physics that come to her instantly. Likewise, Jack discovers that the shapes of many basic guitar chords are now second nature, and he can focus instead on learning chord progressions and complicated rhythms. Information that once took up a lot of mental space has now been compressed into more efficient neural patterns in their brains. Trial and error. While memorization and comprehension may seem straightforward in theory, it's important to keep in mind that learning isn't a linear process. Instead, one of your most important tools is trial and error, the process by which you use your mistakes as a springboard for growth. Though learning from mistakes is a proven educational tool, it often requires an attitude adjustment. If you see mistakes as a sign of failure, as part of a fixed mindset, you'll instead need to embrace a growth mindset by viewing your struggles as signposts to where you should direct your attention. In The Art of Learning, chess champion Josh Waitzkin explains that when you make mistakes, you can reflect on your errors and grow your skills. Each time you act, adjust, and repeat, you make an incremental improvement. You take one step at a time, sometimes succeeding, but often slipping up. For example, imagine playing a chord on a guitar. It doesn't sound right, so you adjust your fingers and try again. Each time you do it incorrectly, the feedback tells you how to correct your form. Eventually, you'll find the correct finger placement. Every incremental correction builds your knowledge. In other words, success lies on a mountain of mistakes. This goes against the way many of us were taught as children. With its emphasis on testing and grades, traditional education punishes mistakes instead of valuing them as an educational tool. Joe Bowler argues the importance of overcoming this unhelpful fixed mindset. Instead, you should view mistakes as a sign that you're on the right track. Just as physical exercise can be painful, struggling with an intellectual concept is a sign that you're working your brain's metaphorical muscles. You can reframe any fears you may have